Hi BookTube! Welcome to the Babbling Bee, and welcome to my thoughts on, I almost said Wuthering Heights, North and South video. This is not a review, I guess, in the typical sense of the word. I just feel like review has like a whole sort of academic or professional connotation to it, and this is a casual channel. I just want to chat with you about my personal experience of reading whatever I have read, without feeling that kind of pressure to think too critically about it or correctly about it. And I think that's probably just like English major hangover, because I'm so used to having to think in a very academic and professional way about what I'm reading, but I'm just really like loath to bring that into my personal reading life. So, all to say, this is my thoughts on North and South video, and I'm just gonna tell you about my experience of reading Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South in Victober. So, I guess I'll just start by saying that I both read that Penguin Black Classics edition of North and South and listened to the audiobook on Audible, which I think is narrated by Juliet Stevenson. I will link more information about the audiobook down below, but she did a great job. It was a beautifully done audiobook, and you know, aside from the fact that once you've heard Richard Armitage doing the John Thornton voice, I don't think anything could ever really top that. So I did find myself, as I was listening, like, to his dialogue read by, you know, a female, just thinking like, oh, this is truly wretched. But, you know, nothing against the actress. It was great work. It just wasn't Richard. What can I say? But yeah, so it was really delightful to listen to the audiobook. I feel like, for me, when I'm intimidated by a classic, an audiobook really, really helps with that, because it sounds much more like human, I guess, to me. It sounds much more like real people having real conversations, and I think that's an element that we can kind of fear losing in our experience of reading a classic. So if you're intimidated by Victorian literature, I would say that audiobooks might be something to try. So yeah, what can I start with on North and South? First of all, I guess it just struck me, as it struck me when I read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, how much Elizabeth Gaskell excels in drawing character and in drawing relationships in families, relationships between friends, romantic relationships. It's the relationships that I think is one of Elizabeth Gaskell's strongest suits, and I so appreciate how she takes her time and she takes so much care in the depiction of each different relationship in the story. I didn't feel like, you know, the romantic relationship gets, you know, 100% of the focus and everyone else is just on the sidelines. It was so, like, her attention and care was so evenly spread across all of the characters and relationships, and I thought that made it really, like, rich and meaningful and relatable, because this is very much a story about family, which leads me to, you know, let me just give you kind of like a brief explanation of how the novel sort of starts out. So it tells the story of Margaret Hale, who is forced to kind of uproot her entire life and everything that she's known to move with her parents to a manufacturing town, a mill town in the north of England, which is a culture and way of life that she and her family are totally unfamiliar with and uncomfortable with. And so it's about moving to a new place, being uprooted, navigating complex family relationships. It's looking at kind of what it means to be a good daughter, by Victorian standards, obviously, but also what it means to be a good person in general, I guess, but like a good parent, a good worker, a good employee, a good boss, because it's also very much looking at like the relationships between bosses and their staff in the mills at the time. And yeah, looking at all of that. So I think I found all of that analysis really enjoyable, but it wasn't, I think I found it so enjoyable because it wasn't like preached to me. It was shown to me through character interaction, through dialogue, really delightful dialogue. Yeah, like I said, I come back to character every time with Elizabeth Gaskell because I think she's, you know, giving us this really rich, deep, thought-provoking stuff to chew on, but it's through character and conversation and people who feel real that she's doing that. So I really appreciated that. This is also a novel that looks a lot at grief and navigating loss, and loss in terms of losing things of the past, losing childhood, losing your old ideas of home, but also losing people who are close to you. And I found those passages in the story so moving, so, again, like, real feeling. Like, I felt for Margaret so much in this story, and I also felt for Mr. Thornton a lot in the story, because I think it's as much a story about John Thornton as it is about Margaret. John Thornton is like he becomes kind of like a family friend, and he runs one of the mills in Milton, and through their acquaintance with him, you know, the Hale family kind of gets more acquainted with the culture of Milton, and the way of life there. So yeah, that was all really cool too. I was kind of nervous about how I would feel about the romantic aspect of North and South, because I have heard that some readers have issues with the way that it's done in the book, that they didn't feel that it was like romantic enough, or that the romance was there fully until like the very end. I didn't feel that way about it at all. I felt like it was very much saturated with romance, subtle but significant throughout most of the book. It does take some time to introduce that aspect of the story, but I was fine with that because I was interested in everything that it was introducing, the characters that it was establishing. I didn't go into this just for the romance, and I don't think it would be fair to say that it's just a novel about two people getting together. It's about so many other things as well. I will say, though, at the same time, I don't know if this is just carryover from my experience with Wives and Daughters, but I did feel like I could have just done with one more chapter. Like I said, maybe I'm just traumatized from Wives and Daughters, which Elizabeth Gaskell passed away before she could completely finish, so it's like mostly wrapped up, mostly everything is there, but there was just a tiny little bit more that, you know, we could have used. And I felt similarly at the end of North and South. I felt like, you know, so much has been leading up to the resolution, so much has been leading up, or not leading up to, but like, so much has happened in the story to develop the two central characters, and it does drop fairly abruptly at the end, which maybe that's fine, maybe it's just good and perfect and I just have a problem with it, which I shouldn't and have no right to because I'm just trashy. I don't know. I could have just done with one more chapter, but that's really my only complaint about North and South. Otherwise, I found it to be incredibly cozy in a weird way, probably because Elizabeth Gaskell does focus on the domestic character relationships, families, etc. I found it to be cozy. Also, a huge theme is like home and what makes a home, so that feeds well into coziness as well. Yeah, it was cozy, it was profound, it was moving, fascinating look into Victorian ideas of, again, like what makes a good person, what makes a good worker, what makes a good leader in a community. ideas of life and death, grief, etc. So lots to chew on, lots to look at and explore in North and South. In addition to a beautiful romance. Yes, I'm in love with John Thornton now, absolutely. And I definitely agree with what I had heard before I read North and South, that it's kind of like Pride and Prejudice, but with mills and strikes. Yeah, I would say so. And for me, I mean, I've read Pride and Prejudice several times now, but am I gonna say it? I think I'm just going to go ahead and say that the romance in North and South was a little bit more romantic for me than the romance in Pride and Prejudice. Whew. Don't at me, people, okay? Like, we're just being real here. So yeah, that is my thoughts on reading North and South. And what I'm going to do now, just to give you, if you haven't read the novel, and maybe you're kind of, again, like intimidated by classics, or maybe you want to know if it's gonna like pique your bookish interest, I'm gonna read you the first paragraph of North and South. I don't know how well you can see this. I'm holding it. It's here. And if you have read the novel and you love it, hopefully you will enjoy hearing the sound of that first paragraph yet again. This is something that I do to like test books regularly. I definitely don't buy one before I can sample it in some way. I don't tend to strictly go by the first sentence anymore, but definitely by like the first paragraph, at most the first page. I can kind of tell, you know what I mean? So we are going to just quickly go through the first paragraph of North and South. So here we go. Chapter 1, Haste to the Wedding. Edith, said Margaret gently. Edith. But, as Margaret half suspected, Edith had fallen asleep. She lay curled up on the sofa in the back drawing room in Harley Street, looking very lovely in her white muslin and blue ribbons. If Titania had ever been dressed in white muslin and blue ribbons, and had fallen asleep on a crimson damask sofa in a black drawing room, Edith might have been taken for her. Margaret was struck afresh by her cousin's beauty. They had grown up together from childhood, and all along Edith had been remarked upon by everyone, except Margaret, for her prettiness. But Margaret had never thought about it until the last few days, when the prospect of soon losing her companion seemed to give force to every sweet quality and charm which Edith possessed. They had been talking about wedding dresses and wedding ceremonies, and Captain Lennox, and what he had told Edith about her future life at Corfu, where his regiment was stationed, and the difficulty of keeping a piano in good tune, a difficulty which Edith seemed to consider as one of the most formidable that could befall her in her married life. And what gowns she should want in the visits to Scotland, which would immediately succeed her marriage. But the whispered tone had latterly become more drowsy, and Margaret, after a pause of a few minutes, found, as she fancied, that in spite of the buzz in the next room, Edith had rolled herself up into a soft ball of muslin and ribbon and silken curls, and gone off into a peaceful little after-dinner nap. So, I think that first paragraph does a good job of kind of giving you a taste of what North and South is looking at. And it's definitely looking not just at, mill life and life in the town. It's looking at life in the parlor, life in the drawing room, life in the home. And it's not shying away from that. It's not being apologetic about that. And that's something that I really appreciated. So yeah, I would highly recommend giving North and South a try if you haven't read it. I don't do star ratings for books. I mean, on Goodreads, I sometimes will, but like in my actual life, I just kind of shy away from putting too much emphasis on a star rating, because to me it just feels like math, and I don't want math anywhere near my reading life if I can avoid it. But yeah, I really love North and South. I can definitely see myself reading it again someday. I think it definitely, like, I don't think I would ever read it in summer. To me, it's very much like an autumnal, cozy, wintry feeling book. So if you need a lovely classic to curl up with this winter ahead, keep North and South in mind. So yeah, those are my thoughts on North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Let me know what you thought of the novel if you've read it. Let me know if you had issues with it. Let me know if you loved it. And I hope you had a great Victober. I hope you have a lovely nonfiction November if you're participating. Another video on that coming up soon. And that's it for me today, guys. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye!